Well, joining me now in the studio is Hla Kyaw. He's the chairman of the European Rohingya Council and a coordinator of the Free Rohingya Coalition. In Yangon, we're joined by political analyst Kyaw Nyein. Also with us in Falmouth, Massachusetts, is the Deputy Asia Director of Human Rights Watch, Phil Robertson. Thanks, all of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Hla Kyaw. It's good news, isn't it, if they're sacking generals and they're punishing generals at a time when Myanmar is being accused of terrible atrocities against the Rohingya. It shows that something positive is happening, right?
No, I don't agree with that, because it is even more, it is dangerous, because this move, firing of 2 generals by the military, is fooling international community, and also it's a kind of PR exercise. And they have been successful in doing so, because I just give you an example. Immediately after publishing this news in the Ministry of Defense Facebook page, the CNN come up with the title, okay, Myanmar military is firing 2 generals responsible.
Because it's the news.
No, yes, but it is not, even the military didn't claim that they have fired 2 generals because they committed international crimes.
Oh, so you think it wasn't for that?
It was, and they have publicly said they were fired because they were weak in cracking down of this crisis. Okay. It is what they said.
Okay, so Kyaw Nyein, this is a PR exercise. These guys are being fired because they're not cracking down on the Rohingya hard enough, rather than as justice and accountability. Is that how you see it?
No, I don't see it that way. The reason is this. You know, in the PR world, they get a lot of people say different things. But what really happened in the country is they are just following the Geneva rules, rule of conduct, and the Burmese military rule of conduct. So this was, but actually, if you look at from the point of view, or from the positive point of view, normally the Burmese military is very stubborn. Okay, but at least they are now following the Geneva Convention. And the rule of conduct set up by the Burmese military is a positive effect.
Okay.
You can say anything you want, but that's the reality.
Okay, let's go to Massachusetts. Phil Robertson, Geneva Convention's being followed here. Myanmar's military is playing by the rules, according to Kyaw Nyein. Do you agree with him?
That is so far from reality, it boggles the imagination. To be honest, this is a military that for the past 60 years has been completely outside the law. And these 2 people who have been sent out from their positions have essentially become scapegoats. You know, they're responding to external pressure, but there's no real intent to reform the military in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, if they were really serious about doing something to hold the military accountable, they would refer themselves to the International Criminal Court, and they would also allow the UN fact-finding mission to enter the country and conduct a real investigation, rather than trying to prop up these sort of bogus national investigations that have gone nowhere.
Right. So, as we try to get to the bottom of this, Kyaw Nyein, let me ask you directly, is Myanmar's military committing atrocities against the Rohingya?
You know, there may be some actions, but I don't think they're just it's not atrocities from our point of view. And if you talk about the ICC and all like that, right? Myanmar is not a signatory to the ICC, and we feel very strongly about the sovereign rights. So you can talk about the ICC and or everything from
but just because,
point of view is
certainly. But just because you don't sign up to the ICC doesn't necessarily mean that you're not committing war crimes or crimes against humanity or ethnic cleansing, right? The crime can still be committed. You just can't be held in the dock at the ICC.
Let me say very clearly. It's not that they are in a war, actually, right? The ARSA and everybody, even Americans committed war
Okay, but
crimes,
we're not talking about the Americans. Come on, let's focus on this. Okay, so let's go to Hla Kyaw. Hla Kyaw, because ARSA was mentioned, let me put it to you this way. Because of what ARSA has done, the same groups that have documented the atrocities of Myanmar, right, and the alleged atrocities, ethnic cleansing, and possible genocide even, of Myanmar's military against Rohingya, these same groups such as Phil Robertson's Human Rights Watch, groups such as Amnesty International, also point out that ARSA, even though the proportion might not be as big, ARSA has also done some terrible things. Let me ask you, has that harmed the cause of the Rohingya and muddied the waters when it comes to holding Myanmar's military accountable?
Yeah, this is the reality, actually. For example, the Burmese military has been looking for a trigger to launch their already pre-planned destruction of the Rohingya community.
So is ARSA bad for the Rohingya?
If they have, what is documented by the Amnesty International and also Human Rights Watch, if that is true, of course, they did something that is bad for the Rohingya community, but you have to understand, where does this ARSA come from? Who has, and why the ARSA attacked this, until now, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, they have been narrating what the Burmese military has been saying. This ARSA has launched coordinated attacks. No one has independently verified whether ARSA has done this or not.
You're still hanging a question mark over this. Phil Robertson, back to the issue of accountability. We've had convictions in the past of soldiers who killed 10 Rohingya men and boys in a particular incident in Indin last year. 7 soldiers given hard labor after an incident. Doesn't that tell you that there is an element of this military, as rotten as it may be overall in its actions, there is an element of holding some of their soldiers and maybe even generals to account?
They are playing a game of catch me if you can. They are saying that if you produce evidence, like the Reuters journalist did, of atrocities, then maybe we'll do something. But these are always sort of lower level military people. These people are expendable. They're scapegoats. It hasn't changed the system, the way the Tatmadaw operates on the ground. It hasn't changed the fact that they systematically target civilians in their sweeps. And it hasn't changed the fact that they are committing crimes against humanity, against the Rohingya. This is, again, it's sort of response to external pressure. And this is why we have said, in fact, that there has to be more external pressure. There has to be sanctions. There has to be real steps forward, not only by individual governments, but also by the UN Security Council. Because the only thing that the Burma military responds to is pressure, external pressure that goes against key things that they want, which is legitimacy. It's issues related to their UMEH and the MEC, their business interests. It's the ability of them to buy arms. All these things that the military wants are the things that the international community have to target if we're going to get any sort of accountability from them.
Kyaw Nyein, to get accountability, the international community needs to pressure your government so that it finally starts to behave properly. How do you feel about that?
I can strongly say that it is just a dream, okay? Because the Burmese military has survived all the sanctions through the dictatorship. And don't forget that, a lot of people from outside are looking into and just looking at the wrong images of the old time. The present commander is a very complicated and realistic guy. He's very different from the previous commander, Than Shwe, is very cunning. But this guy is much more complicated.
So we have Amnesty International saying that they have enough evidence to show that General Min Aung Hlaing is complicit in ordering crimes against humanity.
I question that, because how can they have that kind of evidence, okay? But what I'm saying here is, this is the more complicated guy, and he is a more realistic guy. And then, he has the difference between even the government and the Min Aung Hlaing is he listened. Okay, number one, he listened, and he surrounded himself with a lot of intellectual stuff. So, and another thing that I want all of you to remember is not only that you are looking from a distance, the reality is very different, but also there is a China which the military can always rely on it. In other words, if you're pushing sanctions and everything like that, you are pushing Burmese military into the arms of Chinese, which we have already done before.
Okay, Hla Kyaw, so you push them into the hands of China, and also the top military general's a complicated guy, he listens.
No, it is not complicated. It is intentional, deliberate destruction of the Rohingya community by the military, together with the current government. under the cover of the under the defense of the Aung San Suu Kyi. I tell you this, there are many reasons. For example, Aung Hlaing, he told publicly the destruction of the Rohingya community is unfinished business of World War II. And second, he was there after the August 25th. He was there on the ground, taking all the... There is nothing happened inside Myanmar without detailed knowledge of the commander-in-chief. So he is the responsible. If any military is held into account, he must be the first to be held into the account. So the international EU's sanction on the Aung Hlaing is meaningless, ineffective, because they have so many generals in reserve. You should not forget that Myanmar military has a tradition when a general or a military commander is out of date, out of use, no need to use on the ground, or mission accomplished, and they replace another one by saying, okay, we fired this one, okay, this is to full international community.
Let me go to Phil Robertson to talk a bit more about the international community. Phil, I know as Human Rights Watch you want sanctions, you want more pressure. The Australians say we need to engage. We don't want to cut ties. We need to engage. We need to keep them on side. We don't want them to spiral off or retreat or recoil into isolation again. We even have, in the US, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, sort of blocking new legislation or holding up new legislation at the moment, which would call on Myanmar to treat the Rohingya better. That's what's happening from the likes of the Australians and the Americans. Do you have any sympathy for that argument that we need to keep on engaging with them? If we punish them too much, maybe, as we heard from Kyaw Nyein, they'll just spin off and join the Chinese, and maybe that's the worry.
Well, I mean, Australia is making its arguments for Australia's purposes. I mean, they want to get in there and do business. They're playing the same game in Vietnam, Cambodia, and other places. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't really even consider Australia part of the sort of like-minded group of rights-respecting governments anymore. They're really playing realpolitik. In terms of the U.S., I think that this is still a situation that's you know, developing in terms of what's going to happen on Capitol Hill. But let's remember that, you know, the Burmese army was in very close with the Chinese government, and they moved away from them. They moved away from them because they wanted to have international legitimacy. They got tired of the Chinese selling them lousy weapons. And they were concerned about Chinese encroachments on sovereignty, you know. And so the issue of China is not something they're going to immediately run right back to. You know, sanctions have worked in the past on the Burmese military. They worked in the case of ILO Convention 29 and the whole effort to end forced labor that was being used by the military back in the 1990s. And that ultimately required a possible referral to the International Court of Justice for Burma not complying with their ILO Convention ratification mandate. So, you know, pressure does work on this military, but it has to be concerted and it has to be applied consistently, and it has to be across the board. And when we see that, then I think we'll see a dialogue coming up from this military. Okay,
so Kyaw Nyein, are you running out of friends, or will you run out of friends eventually as the evidence mounts of atrocities?
I disagree. You know what? A lot of these guys are dreaming. If you look at this sanction stuff, without the American, any sanction is basically useless. Now, that's number one. Number two is the world order is changing. The Chinese and the Russians are getting closer, and even Trump is getting together with three of them. So, but if you look at Burma, Myanmar has 4,000 military officers trained in Russia, and they speak Russian. And the reason that Tan Shui get away from China is because they don't want to be dependent on China alone. And now Russia is another card that Burma has not used yet. In the new world order, where the Russia and China is getting acquainted to naturalize together. And,
but you do understand, Kyaw Nyein. We're talking, I mean, essentially, you're talking the realpolitik, and you're saying they have options, right? So don't try and squeeze Myanmar, they have options. But that still doesn't make it right to ethnically cleanse people or kill them just because you have options.
Look, ethnically, it's just an accusation, right? Look at it. In Nigeria, they are killing the Christians, okay?
But you're bringing up other countries again. it doesn't make it right just because Myanmar has China or Russia or anybody else. If there's a crime being committed, there's a crime being committed.
The political reality is the ethnic cleansing is just an accusation.
Okay.
Just if you, I'm sorry to say, but like, you know, the Turkish killing.
There's another country you brought up. Nigeria, Turkey, the United States. Okay, never mind. Okay, you're not going to answer me directly. Anyway, we are out of time. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Hla Kyaw, Kyaw Nyein, and Phil Robertson. Thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.